And we are live. All right, guys, we're back with another show. We got a special show today because we got the 0x team over here. Well, one member right now. The other one member is going to appear sooner or later. He's running late right now, but I will introduce them both regardless. So the first one, which you see in front of you right now, is Amir. Yes, another Amir. It's a duplicity over here. Two Amirs, just spelled with the I with two E's. So Amir's background is he's a full-stack web application and smart contract dev. And he has a former fixed income trader at DRW, an online poker professional. And he studied finance at the University of Illinois. And our second guest, which is not here yet, the other co-founder of 0x, is Will Warren. His background is smart contracts and R&D. Previously applied physics research and simulations at Los Alamos National Laboratory and mechanical engineering at UC San Diego. And he's a PhD dropout. So we got some smart individuals on this call. And so basically, let's kind of like dive into it because I've been following your progression for 0x, and it's actually one of my most exciting projects in the space currently. For anybody that really doesn't know it, why don't we kind of do like a bird's eye view and a 401 on the general spoke of what you're trying to build and how that's going to look like?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the intro, Amir. Great to be here. Really excited about what BlockGeeks is doing. So 0x is a protocol for decentralized exchange on the Ethereum blockchain. So the token ecosystem is very rapidly evolving. I think right now there are over 20 different tokens, combined market caps probably around $2.5 billion. And you see more and more popping up every day almost. And in order for these tokens to be useful, people are going to need to be able to easily acquire them. And then the end goal of these tokens is so that you could actually use them to work with different applications, right? So currently on the Ethereum blockchain, the exchange ecosystem is sort of fragmented. There are a handful of different decentralized exchanges. They all use different smart contracts. They have different learning curves, different levels of optimization, and all of these different exchanges are sort of taking liquidity away from each other. So in our mind, there are huge network effects around liquidity when everybody is using the same underlying protocol. Everyone is using the same settlement layer, the same messaging format. You could very easily trade across exchanges. So that's kind of the problem we're trying to attack, the liquidity problem, decentralized exchange.
So if we're looking at comparisons right now, if we look at, I won't name names, if we're looking at a regular exchange at the moment, and we're looking at 0x right now, obviously everybody knows how a regular exchange works, right? It's one center, control center. You go in based on their rules, you go out based on their rules. They dictate all the rules for in and out. How would 0x look like from me as a user?
So for you as a user, well, first of all, I guess I should explain there's this concept of a relayer on 0x, and that's any person or group that wants to host an order book and essentially act as an exchange. So all of the orders are stored off-chain on 0x, and then they're settled on-chain. So it actually requires someone to, do this service of hosting an order book. So there are going to be different relayers or exchanges popping up, all using the same protocol. And you would go to your relayer and essentially just interact with it like a regular exchange. You would need access to an Ethereum account somehow, either with like MetaMask or Mist or the Parity extension. And yeah, you could just trade directly from your own account. You don't need to deposit any money anywhere. You're fully in control of your own funds at all times. Every time a trade occurs, that just happens on the blockchain. You never have to trust any third party with your money.
Now for 0x, are you guys implementing a fiat gateway, or right now is it only focused on crypto and tokens?
So it's focused on tokens, and the way we see it, traditional financial assets are going to become tokenized. It's only a matter of time. I know there are already a handful of different groups working on tokenizing fiat. I mean, some are already live, right? They're just maybe not used that frequently. But I think things like stocks, bonds, that'll all become tokenized at some point. Also, rare, scarce digital assets like video game items or memes, stuff like that. All of those can be traded on 0x, and obviously, AppCoin's protocol tokens are sort of our main target. We really aim to be able to provide liquidity to other decentralized applications that are building on top of 0x.
So does this solve the problem? Let's say, like, for example, if we look at South Latin America, or if we look at certain places in Africa, or even some places in Asia, they don't really have access to current exchanges to even buy cryptocurrency. Can this solve that problem for accessibility for the people that don't have it?
I would say not really, no. You still have to go through the traditional on-ramps or off-ramps to cryptocurrencies. And that's a harder problem to decentralize, but I know there are groups working on that as well. Our main focus is, once you have cryptocurrency already, being able to exchange it with whatever you need to interact with other applications. So right now, an application built on Ethereum might require one token to be able to be used. But in the future, as apps get more and more complex, you might need 10 tokens to interact with an application. And that's just a terrible user experience. And you need to be able to get those in a seamless way.
So when I use 0x, because I just want to run it through my mind, I'm pretending I'm using it. So when I use 0x, and will I be able to use it on the phone, or is this just on a desktop?
So it's just an open system of smart contracts. So
okay.
How you interact with it is, it's up to you.
It's up to you. Okay. So let's say I'm using it on my computer, and I'm logged in right now. In 0x, do I get then a personalized 0x address? And is that address hold, or how am I interacting with it?
So you just have your regular Ethereum address. It might hold Ether, might hold tokens. And then you could create an order off chain. So you just need to sign it with your private key. It doesn't cost gas or anything. And then when someone wants to actually fill an order, they take that and they inject it into the smart contract, and then the actual transfer of assets will happen. Also, if you are a dApp developer, you can write Solidity code that essentially plug into 0x. For example, you could have a DAO where you vote on which orders to fill or something like that.
So if I understand this correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, so it's almost like you get the marketplace. I can go use it with my own Ethereum address, and I can put up an order of saying I want to sell, I don't know, Ethereum for X amount of price. I put up that sell order on 0x, and I still have it in my own personal wallet, right? It's not costing me gas. And the only time it's actually executed into a smart contract is when someone says, yes, I want to buy it.
Yes.
Okay. So 0x itself, for you guys, since you guys are creating a token as a utility within it, what's the function of that in that process?
So by the way, Will just got here if you want to join in too, before I answer this question.
Sure. Yeah.
Can you still hear me all right?
Yeah, you guys are perfect. Hey, Will. There we go. We got the second founder here.
So Amir just asked about the purpose of our token. So there's two purposes. So first of all, something I haven't explained yet, relayers can charge fees for providing the service of hosting an order book. And all the fees are denominated in 0x tokens. Relayers get to keep 100% of the fees that they charge. It's not like the protocol extracts any rent or anything. We don't get fees from people using the protocol. So that's use case one, to incentivize relayers to host order books. And use case two is for decentralized governance. So sort of as I mentioned earlier, I think the ecosystem is sort of fractured right now, and it's really hard to trade across different exchanges. And we aim to solve this problem through decentralized governance. If everyone is using compatible versions of smart contracts, you could maintain that network effect and have sort of a global liquidity pool. But yeah, it requires governance to make sure that everyone is using the same protocol. Otherwise, if you launch a new version of the protocol, someone decides to stay on the old one, it ends up getting fractured, and you kind of just end up in the same place we are today.
Right. The term, actually, I just found this term yesterday. I've been looking at the literature. The academic term for this this network effect that's created when competitors are building on top of the same standard is called they're called complementary networks. So if there's two different decentralized exchanges, they might even be competitors. If they're both building on top of the same infrastructure, they can provide mutual benefits for each other, because there's sort of this ability to arbitrage across the different exchanges, the different order books, and it ends up producing a mutual benefit for both of them. So it's actually better to have a competitor if that competitor is using the same standard as you are. It's better to have that situation than to not have a competitor at all and be a single liquidity provider.
Interesting. Can we rewind a little bit? I want to dive in a little bit deeper for the host. Can we explain that a little bit more detail? Like you as a relayer in your hosting, how does that look like? Or how does that look like?
Sure. So the protocol is completely agnostic to the different strategies that relayers might use. So since all these orders are completely off-chain, the way in which you communicate that to the end user doesn't matter at all. It could be over Twitter, Facebook, email, WeChat, whatever. I would say the easiest and probably initially most common way to host an order book would just be storing these order messages in a database and organizing them, and just presenting to the end user in the form of an order book. But you could also have different strategies. For example, you could have a dark pool offer a shapeshift type service. You could use a centralized matching engine. These are all things that you could do in 0x, and they all have slight advantages and disadvantages.
Right. So one analogy that could be somewhat relevant is like Craigslist. If you know someone on your email contacts that wants to buy your old bike, you can send them an email and, hopefully they want to buy your bike, but maybe they don't. But if you want to broadcast this offer to the entire world of people that are interested in old bikes, you go on Craigslist and you post your offer. And everyone in the world that's interested in old bikes sees that offer. And if they are interested, they contact you. In 0x, just seeing that offer is enough for them to actually execute a trade with you. Because that offer, that packet of data that represents your order, it contains all the information needed for the smart contract to actually carry out a trade between the person that originated the order and the person that decided to take the other side of it. So relayers are essentially just groups that decide to host these websites, much like Craigslist, and people can post their orders there, and they can charge transaction fees to do that, to offer that service. And it's from an analogy standpoint, this is an okay explanation, but like from an end user perspective, it might look and feel exactly the same as like using GDAX or using Poloniex. Like they don't necessarily see or care that what's going on under the surface is this protocol. Yeah.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but earlier you said that when I place an order in, I still have the tokens in my own personal wallet, correct?
Yes.
So when my tokens are sold for whatever I'm selling it for, and what I receive, does that go back into my personal wallet?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So the way that works is you would provide an allowance for the 0x smart contracts to access your tokens, essentially, and it just pulls them out of your account and pulls someone else's tokens into your account when a trade occurs.
Right. And the reason why you're comfortable providing this particular smart contract with access to your funds is because the code is completely open source. You can look through it, you can audit it, you know exactly what it's capable of doing. So you know that this smart contract is not going to be touching your funds in any way unless you provide explicit permission by generating an order that is signed with your that's signed with your private key.
Mm. So can we do a little bit deeper dive on the tokenization? I know you just touched on earlier, but I want to see how it fits into the overall ecosystem of 0x.
Yeah.
So can we touch on that? Can you like go through like the bird's eye view of how the 0x token will be facilitating the whole ecosystem?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think the most important part is the governance. So we're building this completely unopinionated piece of public infrastructure that anyone can go and build on top of. And if we expect people to build these profitable businesses, these decentralized exchanges on top of 0x, they need to be able to have a say in how that infrastructure is upgraded over time. It wouldn't make any sense for someone to go and build a profitable business. It takes a lot of time and effort. It's expensive. It wouldn't make sense for them to commit all of that to building on top of 0x if one single person or group could just go and decide to change the protocol in a way that completely destroys their business or requires them to completely rebuild. So there needs to be a governance process in how all of these different applications built on top of 0x can, oversee the upgrade process. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
And the way it's structured is so that big players in protocol, big traders, big relayers, or big dApps that use 0x will end up having a larger say in governance because they probably have more tokens.
Yeah, they naturally accumulate tokens over time.
So this is kind of similar to like if you ran a proof of stake, where if you're staking X amount of tokens, you have a little bit more power and say within the network as a node.
Right. Yeah. So that's like a critical piece. Like, I don't think you could really expect to build a future-proof system that has a bunch of stuff built on top of it if you weren't able to sort of smoothly transition to improved versions of the protocol over time. It's just like a critical piece of the whole system. The second use for the token is for incentivizing relayers to host and maintain these off-chain order books. And what's really interesting about token-based business models is that anyone that wants to go and build a decentralized exchange and therefore increase the utility of 0x protocol and its token can purchase a bunch of tokens, and then they can go commit a bunch of time and effort to building a useful application, a decentralized exchange, on top of 0x, and they can directly influence the utility and therefore the value of the token. So they have an information edge. Now, I think this is like a new concept. So like imagine if you were developing an iOS app and you went and bought a bunch of Apple stock before you released your iOS app to the public. Probably wouldn't really matter. Okay, like no one really cares about your iOS app. Apple's worth many billions of dollars. It's not, your iOS app probably isn't very critical to the utility of iOS as a platform. But when we're talking about these open protocols that are very tiny and they have tokens, and the value of these tokens is directly proportional to the utility of the protocol, you have a massive information edge if you decide to go and build on top of that protocol. And so that's this idea of like bootstrapping a network that like Fred Ursum talks about this in his Medium articles, and it's like a really interesting concept that I don't know if we've really seen something like this possible before tokens.
So what's your guys' roadmap right now currently? So I know you guys have a launch coming up soon, maybe next half a year or under, but what's your general roadmap within the next year or so?
So there are a couple tools that we want to build out initially. I guess one of our main areas of focus will be the governance aspect. So initially our contracts will be using a time-locked multi-sig, which makes it completely secure even if we wanted to, attack it. But governance is still a big area of research, and there are a lot of different projects working on it. Our focus currently is to launch a functional exchange protocol at the time that we launch our token. So yeah, we're getting to that point first, then focusing on governance. Some other tools that we're considering building are like a trade explorer, for example, like the Etherscan of 0x. They're going to be essentially 3 different areas of focus for us. So user tools, developer tools, and then R&D. Trade Explorer is an example of a user tool. As for developer tools, we're building a JavaScript library, 0x.js, which will make it really easy for people to interact with a protocol without having to deal with the smart contracts directly. It'll allow for people to easily set up relayers. We might release pre-configured databases, things like that, to make it a lot easier for relayers to operate. R&D privacy is something that's really important. There are a bunch of optimizations that can be made, especially if orders are private.
Phase 2, so this is something we don't talk about very much because it can be distracting from the primary utility offered by the protocol. But phase 2 is we want to build a fully decentralized order book. So instead of having an order book that's stored in a centralized database and owned by a single entity, we want to spread that order book over a peer-to-peer network that's censor resistant, and anyone that is participating in that network by propagating the order book and hosting will earn a steady flow of tokens, and that flow is proportional to their contribution to the network. But that is like an entirely different undertaking that will require, serious research.
It sounds ambitious. It's almost like you want to piggyback off like Tor or something. It's fascinating.
Yeah, well, we want to got to get rid of all the centralized points of failure.
Mm-hmm. So what can you give us a closer estimation on when your launch is?
Yeah, so we're going to be launching early Q4.
Okay.
Right now, so our smart contracts are fully functional. You can go and interact with them right now on Kovan, 0xOTC, which is at 0xproject.com/OTC. And it works. It's fully functional. We've done a ton of testing. We're going through security audits right now. And immediately after our contracts are, we're positive that they're safe and secure, we're going to deploy them to the Ethereum mainnet, and that's going to happen in a matter of weeks. And after we deploy to mainnet, we're going to go and use 0x protocol to deploy our token.
Awesome. So we'll wrap it up at that. Just first want to thank you guys for coming on the show. Is there any last final words you want to tell our audience?
Thank you for your attention. Yeah.
Awesome. So what's the best resource if they want to find out, or if you want to follow 0x, what's your website? What's your Twitter?
So our website is 0xproject.com. If you're a developer, definitely check out our GitHub.
Twitter is 0x Project, and our Slack, we're very active on our Slack, which is 0xproject.slack.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys.
Thank you, Amir.
Thank you.